International Monetary Fund has warned that South Africa's economic growth is likely to decline. An IMF team which was visiting the Republic says this is due to the ongoing power cuts, among other issues. SA's GDP growth is projected to decline to 0.1% in 2023. We're now joined by Duma Gqubule, an independent economist, to help us make sense of what lies in between. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. So as we mentioned, the IMF is forecasting a deceleration of the economy to 0.1% in 2023. In January, South Africa's central bank said it expected the economy to grow by 0.3% in 2023. And in between that lies what?
This isn't just a temporary issue. I'd like to explain the context. Since the global financial crisis in 2007 to 2008, our economy has not grown. Most countries in the world recovered from the global financial crisis. So we had what is called a lost decade between 2009 and 2019, before COVID, where GDP per capita did not grow. So what we're seeing now, we're on a similar trajectory, because in 2022, our GDP per capita was lower than it was in 2019. So we have had, and what the forecast that you were talking about, it is for 3 more years of declining GDP per capita. So we're heading towards a second lost decade in terms of our economy. And the other way of looking at it is that GDP per capita, which is GDP per person, in 2022 was lower than it was in 2007. So now the IMF, the central bank, are saying we're going to have another 3 years of declining GDP per capita. So that will be 18 years of the economy not growing. I don't understand how the government can keep doing the same policies for more than a decade without success, and they still want to. I don't understand it, Dudu. Our economic policies have failed dismally, and it's time to change them. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get into the changes and taking a look at the economic policies that are currently in place. What drove the loss in those years of 2009 and 2019 that you call the lost decade?
So basically, there was a recovery from 2010 to 2013. We started creating jobs again. But from 2014, the government started with austerity policies, and there was a collapse in consumption spending by the government, and a collapse in investment spending by the government, especially your Transnets and your Escoms and so forth. So when you stop investing, as simple as that, if you stop investing in your people and your infrastructure, the economy collapsed. So the government stopped investing in its people, and they started what I call a public sector investment strike. So that was what brought the economy to where it is now.
I can hear the frustration when you speak about the government keeping the same policies that do not stimulate the economy. If you could characterize those policies, help us understand, or help the lay person understand what they are.
Okay, so the first one is energy, Eskom. There is no solution to this problem until we solve Eskom in the short term. People say, no, it will take years to solve Eskom, but the previous CEO, Andre de Ruyter, had no interest in fixing the current fleet. And what I'm seeing from the new board is that they're focusing on fixing the current fleet. And what I don't understand is that the government doesn't want to invest in new energy capacity. They say that the private sector will invest 100% and we're going to invest 0. And they're repeating their old failed economic policies. So number one, we have to get Eskom working. We have to get the energy availability factor up towards 60%, at least 60 to 65% in the next few months. And I predict if we continue on this trajectory with Eskom, load shedding will end by the end of the year when we have Kusile units back online, as long as they keep focusing on the existing fleet. And I've been saying this, Dudu, for months. I don't want to hear about renewables until we get these plants working. Renewables is the cherry on the top, but what we need now is these existing plants to work. That's number one. Number two, we've got Treasury that only cares about debt. Central bank only cares about inflation. Next week, they're expected to increase interest rates again. The part I don't understand is that inflation has got nothing to do with us as South Africans spending too much money. So when you use interest rates, it's when South Africans are are spending too much. Now, that is clearly not the case. So there's no use for... Eskom has done an effective job in controlling, in collapsing demand in the economy. And so there's no need for the central bank to be increasing interest rates anymore. Secondly, Treasury has got this austerity budget where they stop the spending over the next 3 years, the non-interest spending by the government. If you take into account inflation and the growth of the population, it's going to decline by about 3.7% a year. And according to government's own forecast, government consumption spending will decline by 0.6% a year. So you can't shrink yourself back to growth. The public sector is about 1/3 of the economy. So the public sector can make or break the economy. So when the public sector stops spending or cuts down spending, our economy tanks. So what you have now is 3 factors. Eskom, you have central bank increasing interest rates, and then you have, it's a deadly cocktail, and then you have National Treasury, which is doing these austerity policies. Now, the part I don't understand is we have an ANC government that doesn't want to win the election. They're going to end the social relief of distress grant, which benefited 8 million people, just before the election, 2 months before the election. They're going to end the president's stimulus package just before the election. And I'm really surprised that the president didn't put a fight on this issue, because I remember talking to him last year, and he was so proud of this stimulus package, and now it's going to end. Now, how does a government that wants to win an election decides to take away the support they were giving to 9 million people 2 months before the election? And you must remember that the last time they did this, we had July 2021 in KwaZulu-Natal, and they had to reintroduce it again. So I just don't understand it. It's way above my pay grade as to why the government would keep on implementing these disaster economic policies and they expect a different result.
There's also something that is way above my pay grade and I do not understand, and it's got to do with the stimulus package, but we'll get into that in a few moments. You speak of the central bank and its obsession with interest rates and staving off inflation, and then you hear voices from some sectors of the economy that tell you, well, we don't want to be like another Turkey, for instance, so the central bank has to go in this direction to keep a handle on inflation. So how do we understand that? To say, well, look at what other countries are doing, so the central bank is on the right track.
Well, the central bank is just killing the economy. So our inflation has got nothing to do with us spending too much money. Our inflation is supply side driven, as we've said. Now, what we've had is many supply-side shocks at the same time, which is rare. And I called the end of the cycle around July last year, and I said our inflation has peaked. All the forecasts show that inflation will continue to decline for the rest of the year, but what's happening is that we've got these repeated supply-side shocks. And it is the wrong medicine to be able to increase interest rates. It's like you're punishing the wrong kid, in the class. So you're just you're reusing the wrong policy tool. If the government really cares about inflation, they would maybe reduce the fuel levy. They should attack these things where they come from, and not increase interest rates, because it won't help. Our economy has collapsed. There is not spending power in the economy. So what is the point of increasing interest rates here? Yeah.
Okay. Going back to the stimulus package, you're saying that the ANC is hell-bent on, is serious about losing the election because they're going to be cutting the stimulus package. Over the weekend, or was it on Human Rights Day, that the president was given an address on the 21st on Tuesday, and he was very proud of the fact that South Africa's population, some 13 million people, almost half of the population, depend on a social grant of some form or another, saying that this is the only country on the African continent that guarantees this for its people, dubbing it a human right or contributing towards a human right. Now, you spoke of things being above the pay grade and above understanding. That, for me, makes me feel uncomfortable. It does make me feel uncomfortable, because then you think of the quality of life of people, or you having a sense of agency about your life, waking up and knowing that you have purpose about your day, right? So you mentioned that the government is putting the onus on private sectors to create jobs, and they're contributing zero to this situation. But yes, people do need to be assisted. Do people also not deserve to get a sense of dignity about their day, about their lives, that goes beyond a 350, that goes beyond 1,000 rand. I mean, when you have that, how long does it take you? Even people who are earning, or we think are earning enough, you can hardly make it beyond the 10th day or the 8th day of the month.
Yes, that's correct. So now, let me look from the fourth quarter of 2008 to the fourth quarter of 2022, last year. The labor force grew by 7 million people, and the economy created just under 1 million jobs. So the increase in unemployment is 6 million. So now we've got 11.8 million people who are unemployed. And if you look at the forecast from the central bank and the treasury, we are not going to create the jobs that we need today. And so what you're seeing in terms of social grants is that it's a symptom of an economy that is not growing. So that's number one. Number two, it's not true that we're the only country in Africa. There's some countries in North Africa that provide similar social protection. And if you compare us with upper middle income countries, which we are, we're not spending a lot compared to other countries in terms of social protection. So I would say, in terms of the stimulus, you have to, everywhere in the world, it works the same. You blend consumption spending to give people immediate relief, and you do infrastructure spending. Now, the government, by cutting, they don't want to do infrastructure spending, and they don't want to do consumption spending, so what are they going to do? Yeah. What is the alternative? I don't understand what the alternative is. If your economy is not growing, the government must put more money into the economy. That's how it works, yeah.
Okay, Duma, then the question arises, in my very simple thinking at least, if we know the solutions, right, because we speak a lot on the channel on the issues of the economy, and there's varying views, but there are some things that have a common thread that seem to be at least understandable. If it is so easy to do, and if it is not being implemented or it is not being done, then in whose interest is this continuing, or in whose name is this continuing? Who stands to benefit from an economy that does not grow?
That's a very cool. I don't buy conspiracy theories in general, but there's no other explanation, because what the government is saying, no, we are broke, we can't invest in our people, we can't invest in our infrastructure, so everything must be done by the government, by the private sector. So if you look at the conditions to the loan at Eskom that Treasury gave them, they're not allowed to invest in generation capacity. They're not supposed to invest in transmission. What logic is that? That Eskom, in 1998, what happens is that the Eskom went to the government and said, no, we need to invest in new capacity. The government said no. And then they said the private sector is going to do it. And then the private sector didn't do it. Now, 25 years later, the government is going back to that old playbook that failed and saying, we don't have money, so the private sector must do 100% and we must do 0. And Eskom, you are not allowed to invest in your own company. What logic is that? Because a proper country, Dudu, they invest every single year in their energy capacity. There shouldn't be even a debate that how much do you need to power this economy? Our economy needs to grow at 6% every year. And then how much energy do you need for it to grow at 6% in every year? And then you just do that. That's what I can't understand here. Yeah.
Duma, a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.